We have food coming and all those things, and also one of our speakers has to leave before too long. So we got to get started. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I'm Tim Vanderveen. I really appreciate this opportunity to have been involved in this program. It's awesome, and thanks to the APSF for putting this on. Dr. Bodle mentioned the issue of drug shortage at the very beginning, and we have with us our first speaker is Erin Fox, and Erin is a PharmD at the University of Utah. And the University of Utah, I didn't know this till I read on her bio, but the University of Utah Drug Information Services has provided all the content for the ASHP Drug Shortage Resource Center, and she's led that project since 2001. I didn't know we had a drug shortage since 2001, but seems like it maybe isn't getting better. I think I heard at one time there were like 400 drugs or something like that that were on shortage. So anyway, Erin, we really appreciate you being here, and we'll turn it over to you. Careful stepping up.
Okay. Thank you. All right, thanks everybody. Super quick. I'm not talking on behalf of the University of Utah, and we are a Vizient hospital. It's a group purchasing organization. My drug information service has a contract with Vizient. None of that money comes to me personally, but I just want to be very upfront about that. Like Tim mentioned, we do provide all the content for the ASHP Drug Shortage Resource Center. And, you know, we have done this, and I really need to quit putting that date on there because I'm aging myself. I had no idea that when I volunteered for this in 2001 that I would spend really my whole career on drug shortages. It's not something that you, like sulfites, it's not something you set out to be an expert in. But there you go. One of the things that we do is we really collaborate with a lot of different folks. I talk to FDA's drug shortage team almost on a daily basis, also work really closely with ASHP and others. So I wanted to show you the most current statistics that I put together. These are available on the ASHP website at any time if you ever want to use these in a talk you're giving. Each one of those yellow bars shows the number of new shortages that happened in that calendar year. So you can see that for 2018, with 95 at the end of June, we're on pace more for like this 2014 year. But what this graph doesn't capture are the ongoing and active shortages, because just because a shortage started in 2018 doesn't mean it ends in 2018, right? So that's what this line tries to approximate. So what I do is I take the active number of drug shortages at the end of each quarter, and you can see that we are kind of on a little bit of an We're on an upswing. So, you know, we used to be right around 300. We got down to right around 200, 175. Now we're back up with this curve right around 225 active shortages. So which drugs are short right now? These are the top 5 drug classes. The green portion of the bar are the injectables. So really, when you look at what's short, it's generic injectable drugs. That is the big problem right now. So really, what do these numbers mean? We know that the rate of new shortages is starting to increase, and really common shortages are really starting to impact patient care and pharmacy operations. We are short of the most basic products that almost every patient needs, right? Saline, lidocaine, dextrose, morphine, fentanyl, ketamine. These are basic products that many, many patients need. So one idea is I just like to take a pause and try to think about what's making it feel worse right now. When I showed you those graphs, you know, each shortage counts as 1. So saline counts as 1. And I've got a resident working on a project with me this year to try to make some kind of a severity scoring tool so that we could have a little bit more data about some of these shortages and how they're really impacting patient care and clinical operations. But until that time, it's an imperfect tracking system. But really, when you think about all of the safety technology that we have in place to make things safe, smart pumps, automation, all of that is great when you have product. And each one of those systems is designed to use one product, the same product all of the time. And that's not our reality right now. It hasn't been our reality for years, but the technology still insists on the same product all the time, and we have to make do with scraping up whatever ondansetron we can get and those 5 vials are all going to look different. I think it's also worse right now because of the large amounts of product needed. When you have products that are short that you use on almost every single patient in your daily practice, that's a huge impact to patient care and to operations. We also have some uncertainty around some of the alternatives. So syringes. How many of you know that IV syringes are not FDA approved to store medications? Yeah, FDA reminded us of that just a few months ago. Said, hey, you can't store drugs in syringes. Well, wait, syringe pumps are approved, right? We have all these 503B compounders making everything in syringes. They're storing drug in syringes. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around that. So we'll have to see if we get to any resolution there. There's certainly a lot of unapproved drugs that have become brand name drugs. So these are formerly unapproved drugs, like nitrous oxide, things like phenylephrine, epinephrine, ephedrine. These things were never FDA approved until very recently. The FDA approval is great. It gives us all of the safety information that we need for those products, yet it basically turns a $1 vial into a $150 vial. And so hospitals are having to scrape by trying to manage the huge increases in price that comes as a result of those FDA approvals. So when you listen to FDA talk about what is the problem, why are we having drug shortages, and manufacturers are not required to publicly disclose a reason for shortages, but FDA has provided us data, and they tell us that in general, it's usually a quality problem at the manufacturing facility. So that's really the underlying cause. And when you think of so many basic products in short supply right now, we think back to what's going on with Pfizer and the Hospira factories that they purchased. So Pfizer purchased the Hospira generic factories. Those factories had very well publicized problems in 2011, 2012. Were they fixed? Apparently not, because now they're short again. And those same factories, Pfizer is working hard in cooperation with FDA to rehab those facilities right now. They're spending, they tell me, $1 billion to do this, and it's taking an extraordinarily long time. The other thing, everyone remembers last year, we had Hurricane Maria that devastated Puerto Rico. Horrific, huge loss of life and all of the saline shortages that followed. But that happened already at constrained supplies, because B. Braun earlier that year had told all of their customers to go find saline somewhere else because they had to close their factory to fix things for quality reasons. And if you read the warning letter posted on FDA, you can read how those items were not fixed year after year after year after year, finally resulting in a warning letter. The other problem that we have is a lack of transparency, and I loved the conversation from the last session. One of the things that I'm not sure you might all be aware of is there is actually no requirement for a drug company to disclose which company actually made that product. So it might say Pfizer on the label. That does not mean that Pfizer made the product. So, it's really interesting to have to purchase something and in some cases pay a lot of money for something that you have no idea who even made the product. And so this is one of those things that I think there's definitely room for advocacy around. We should be able to know who made this product. We should be able to know, follow the quality data that FDA does give us, limited amounts, redacted warning letters and inspections, but we should be able to make some decisions based on purchasing from a high quality manufacturer. So this is a really interesting paper if you haven't read it. Janet Woodcock and Marta Wasinska is an economist, and she was working at FDA at the time. So Janet Woodcock is director over CEDAR at FDA. And this paper argues that because there's no transparency into which company makes any given product, there's actually no incentive for companies to have the highest level of quality. Sure, you've got to do the minimum, but there's no incentive to have that extra level of quality that could potentially prevent some of the quality issues that are happening at factories. Another challenge that we have is this is a very concentrated market. In many, many cases, it might look like there are 4 or 5 suppliers of a product, but in reality, typically one company makes the majority of the drug supply. And so even if it looks like you could get product from 5 different companies, there's no way they can make up the difference if the company with the market share has a problem. There are also no limits when companies decide to merge. FTC actually doesn't have to take into account any recommendations at all from FDA or other public health agencies about the impact of the merging of those 2 businesses that very much could, result in life-threatening drug shortages. FTC is only required to think about the business end of that. And Federal Trade Commission had a nice conference last November, and this is one of those suggestions that they may really take under advisement. We talked a little bit about opioids earlier in this session. We heard about those, but DEA's quota system for their opioids, that can also be another real reason why some shortages are not resolving fast enough. So even though Pfizer told everybody, over a year ago, hey, we're going to shut down our CarpEject manufacturing, we are going to be short of opioids. Good luck. The other companies that could have made up the difference were unable to get adequate raw material from the DEA in a timely manner to really make a difference. They did get some eventually, but only after many, many organizations sent letters begging and asking. And it was a little bit too little too late. So what's going on as far as fixing this problem? So FDA has put together their interagency drug shortage task force. Commissioner Gottlieb seems very, very interested in working on this problem. He's really been working on improving competition, approving new products, really focusing on increasing the number of suppliers, not only for drug pricing reasons, but also for shortages. And so hopefully we will see some action around that. I know there are a number of listening sessions. I've certainly been asked to participate with that group. Today, I unfortunately have to leave this great meeting, and I'm so disappointed to miss the labeling discussion. I hope that gets recorded so I can watch it later, because I really, really want to hear that. But I am off to the National Academy of Sciences. The Assistant Secretary for Preparedness is actually putting together a 2-day workshop. Today's day 1, tomorrow's day 2, on drug shortages, particularly around disasters. And if there's anything we can do to try to prevent those from happening, there's quite a bit of participation from all over, outside of government, inside of government. So hopefully we'll see something there out of those proceedings. And then later on this month, ASA, ASHP, American Hospital Association, AMA, I'm not going to read you the alphabet soup there, but they are putting on a summit to really talk about drug shortages and think about some really critical questions, like should some drugs be considered critical infrastructure? Right now, there's no plan to have any kind of backup plan or redundancy or even a stockpile of saline. And when you think about how essential fluids are for patient care, that seems pretty risky, especially with what we faced last summer with the hurricanes. So I think that's a really important question to think about. Should we think about some medications as critical infrastructure, the same way we think about power plants and other things? There are a number of advocacy suggestions. Again, all of these links will be available. I think I sent Mark a few other papers as well. But, there's lots of little things that could really help. One of those is getting FDA more of the information they need in a timely manner. Right now, drug companies do have to tell the FDA if they're going to have a shortage. But guess what? They don't have to tell the FDA why there's a shortage. That really hampers FDA's ability to try to work and prevent that shortage from happening in the first place. So there are little things we can certainly advocate around transparency on our drug labels. Shouldn't we know what we're buying? Shouldn't we know who made that product that we're injecting into someone's vein? I think so. So just to sum up, you guys know this. Severe shortages are affecting patient care. They're affecting operations. They are preventing you guys from having medication delivered in the exact way that you want. Your pharmacists are probably struggling on a daily basis to get any lidocaine or any bupivacaine in stock. And it's not going to be, right now, it's not going to be the right strength. And it's not going to be the amount that you want. And it's not going to be the vial size that you want. But if you have some at your hospital, you're lucky to have it. I'm really happy that there is a lot of renewed interest by key stakeholders. Hopefully we will see some changes. I remember a very dark time, mid-2000s, when it was virtually impossible to get anyone interested in talking about drug shortages. And now I'm lucky enough this month to participate in 3 meetings on drug shortages. So it's it's feast or famine, but I'm happy for the feast in this case. I think we will see some stabilization, especially if Pfizer truly does spend the money to fix those plants. But it's going to take a long time. It's we're still a year, probably a good year out from true stabilization of many of these products. So with that, please feel free to contact me. I know I have to leave after this, so if I don't get a chance to talk with you or if you have questions, please do feel free to reach out. And then I'm really excited because Trish is going to talk about the real meat of this topic. So thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Erin will be here for the panel, providing that the moderator can keep us on time. And I remember in pharmacy school that we were taught with the USP that drugs had to be between 95 and 105%. And then Dr. Brown mentioned, if I heard him right, that the 80 to 120%. Is that correct? So I don't know where that 95 to 105 went and the 80 to 120, but I just wonder if you see differences in the effects of drugs, because that's a huge difference. And then when Erin says that you don't know where the drugs came from, that even makes it even scarier. So it's a good thing I'm retired. So our next speaker is Trish Meier, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Trish for a number of years. She's been extremely active in the APSF as on the newsletter committee and also on the education and training, and she's published on drug shortages in the APSF newsletter. So she's at Baylor, Scott and White, and Trish is going to talk a little bit about being at the receiving end of all these issues, being the director of pharmacy and not having the drugs. So I'm anxious to hear how you deal with that. 3 bottles of water.
Yeah. So Erin's a little bit shy. She, when she says FDA calls her on a daily basis, it's Scott Gottlieb, the FDA commissioner, who calls her most of the time. So she is an impressive woman, has done a lot. Before any of us ever knew drug shortages were going to be the problem, she had a keen insight to realize that this is something that needed to be addressed, and she kept the metrics and the data, and it's impressive how government agencies are leaning on her for information. So my topic is patient safety, implications of drug shortages. And let's see. So this was a national survey. It was conducted by the Institute for Safe Medication Practices. It was conducted between August and October of 2017. It wasn't necessarily a scientific study, but it was just to get a pulse of what was going on in hospitals across the country with drug shortages. And it was sent to individuals who were medication safety officers, who were pharmacy directors and purchasing agents to sort of get a wide view of how they saw the drug shortages. And so this came from that survey. So if you in anesthesia felt like it's just you who's really suffering the brunt of drug shortage, well, it sort of is. You have always been at the top of the list when it comes to drug shortages. Now, this last survey, emergency care moved up, but really emergency care uses a lot of the drugs that you use. And so you sort of held the top 4 spots because you give antibiotics in the OR. There's been problems with that. So you're not paranoid. It is a problem. Just to validate that, I went on to the website for ASHP to look at the current drug shortage list. And this is updated by Aaron's group on a regular basis. And on Monday, I looked at it, and there were 191 drug product shortages. And so I printed it off, and I took it to the 2 OR pharmacists, and I said, look at all the products that are on here. Tell me how many are used up in surgery, perioperative, anesthesiology, and look at it, but look at it the ones you use daily, weekly, and even if it's rare, go ahead and put a check on it. And when they brought it back to me, 73% of those 191 drugs were drugs that you use in the OR. Now, you might not necessarily feel it. You might say, we have drug shortages, but I don't think we experience that many, because there's a lot of background work that's being done by pharmacy. Most pharmacies recognize OR. We've got to keep the OR going. It's the big money maker in the institution. It saves people's lives. And so we will take from other areas to make sure OR, ICU, and ED, and actually OR is the top. At least that was a decision made by our leadership to make sure OR, and of course ICU is very close by. So there might be a reason that the drug is on shortage, but we've pulled it back from the med-surg areas, we've pulled it back from some of the clinics to make sure that OR can continue to do their business. Also, drug shortages are intermittent. So it would be nice, actually easier for us to handle if a drug shortage happened, I couldn't get it, I knew what to do, I got my alternate drug, I came up with a plan, and then on a set date it came back. It's not that way, it's intermittent. And so when pharmacy says, we have a major drug shortage, I can't give you morphine, and then the next day I give you morphine, you're like, I don't believe you anymore. But that's how it happens. And we don't get notified. All of a sudden, the guy's at the back door with the shipment of morphine injectables that we ordered 6 weeks ago. It was a back order. And so it's a very erratic system, and it's not a lot of notification at all. And these are just a few of the drugs that are currently on that drug shortage list. And of course, maybe your pharmacies have found alternate sources, maybe they found other companies, maybe they were smart enough to keep a larger stock. Most pharmacies now have what we call just-in-time inventory. It's about a 3-day supply on the shelf, and we have been burned by that because 3 days doesn't give you much time to come up with a plan. And so now most pharmacies are extending their inventory and stocking 5-7 days. We don't hoard, or we say we don't hoard, but we do. So this was part of that survey. This was sort of the headline that said drug shortages continue to compromise patient care. As Aaron said, that's not anything new. But what ISMP found was that the responses from all these groups of people was an exhaustive account of high frustration, just citing all the difficulties that they've had to experience and how we're misspending resources, how we're devoting so much time to these drug shortages that we're pulling away from patient care. And so it was 300 respondents who returned their surveys. And these were the emotions that you feel, that we feel, we all feel. It's just unacceptable. We can't continue like this. And we don't think there was very good planning when this merger occurred. How could they have not foreseen that the patients were going to suffer, the customers were going to suffer? Those are smart people, and we're just sort of in awe that that was missed. And then that leads to mistrust. And the people who responded to the survey felt that maybe there's a motive to this. Is pharma trying to increase prices, and so you pull back on the drug shortage, and then suddenly when it comes on the market, I'll pay anything to get fentanyl, I'll pay anything to get some of the drugs that we need for antibiotics. And that's what happens. Vancomycin, 1 gram, I think we were paying somewhere under $5, maybe a lot less. It went on shortage, had a hard time getting it. When I could get it, it was up to $39 a vial. It's gone back down now, but that is a problem that we experience. So other parts of the survey were that the individuals who responded turned in some of the actual errors that occurred because of these drug shortages. 67% were associated with the wrong dose or concentration. And that's what we have to do. We do anything to get the drug. We try to get the same strength, but when we can't, we do whatever we need to do just to get the drug in. And the notification is certainly not a very good structured system. It's emails go out, we post signs, but there's still going to be that individual who pulls the drug and doesn't recognize it's a different concentration. We're not getting notified. You might think this is a finely oiled machine between our wholesaler and our GPO and the pharma manufacturers. You think they would want this good customer service, like, oh, by the way, we're going to have a drug shortage and it's going to be this long, and this is the reason. That's not information, as Erin mentioned, that we get. Sometimes we find out in pharmacy there's a drug shortage when the guy at the back door doesn't deliver the drug that we ordered, that the company said they had in stock, that showed that, check, we're going to get that drug, and it really doesn't show up. And then other times we find when we go into the ordering website that it's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so we have to do a lot of heroic kind of tasks to try to snag those drugs as best we can. 47% thought that this resulted in patients receiving a less effective drug. 75% stated that the patient treatments have been delayed in the drug shortage, and one person sent in the error where a patient was delayed in getting sodium bicarbonate, which was really one of the scariest shortages we've had, and that the patient died because of the delay in treatment. So patients are dying. I think the ASA did a survey and for anesthesiologists, and there were reports of patient deaths that were attributed to the drug shortage. So drug shortage eras aren't particular. This same drug shortage on fentanyl, problems with anesthesiology, problems with pharmacy, problems with nursing, just different ways. But it all causes the eras to occur. The anesthesiologist administered 50 milligrams of sufentanil instead of fentanyl and was thinking of the fentanyl dose. The pharmacist made a PCA of sufentanil, thinking of fentanyl dosing, and the nurse went to the automated dispensing cabinet and put in the mnemonic SU for Sublamace. It took her to sufentanil, and she didn't barcode, and she gave that to the patient. All these involved patients became unresponsive and required supportive care, but they did recover. So as the drug shortage problem continues, many times we'll rely on our compounders to help us to see if they have drug. And actually, we find that the compounders do have a reserve. They do have a reservoir, and when the manufacturers run out, they really can be our saviors. Now, if you're not regularly doing business, you might not be able to get the volume that you need, but then we'll go to another compounder and another compounder. And that's what happened in this case. This pharmacy, hospital pharmacy, for the succinylcholine had to use two different vendors, and in that same drawer was the succinylcholine. Now, fortunately, this succinylcholine is identical. It's the same strength, but it's the labeling that's a little bit of an issue. And the FDA has no control over the labeling of how our compounders are placing their labels on these pre-filled syringes. So that's not part of FDA's oversight. There is a Chapter 7 that does recommend you use as the prominent signage the strength in milliliters, which would be what you'd want to see as that primary expression. Errors occur, strength for the whole container. They want to see that to be the 200 milligrams should be the prominent. And so what happens when the prominent is just the strength per ml, some people assume that's the strength of the whole syringe, and then there can be an overdose. And the second picture of the fentanyl and the hydromorphone, that's clear. It's clear to us right now. It's clearly labeled. But what happens is you're sort of drawn into an assumption. So when you see a syringe have many other features that look alike, you tend to not look at the label because you've been drawn into, well, the syringe is safe, the label's blue, the lettering is the same. Okay, I'm in a hurry, and so I'm going to grab that, and that's how errors can occur also. Now, this was an article from a oncologist at MD Anderson, and he published this on July 18th of this year. And not that this is really relevant, I just thought it was a little bit interesting because he was talking about how his cancer patients are suffering. They're in pain because we've had this shortage of hydromorphone, we've had morphine and fentanyl, and there's really, with cancer patients who are in the hospital who really can't take oral, there's really just not a lot of good options. And so he wrote this article talking about that, but also talked about his interventions, what they had adopted at MD Anderson, which really weren't very good because these interventions really never are very good. They're usually, there's always something wrong. Maybe the drug's got more side effects than the preferred drug, or maybe it's the wrong concentration, or maybe there's not an available alternate drug. But what happened at the same time is that Pfizer, or Hospira, which Hospira is a Pfizer company, they had a holdup of two of those drugs, hydromorphone and morphine, and that's what he was talking about. He couldn't get those drugs, and what had happened is they held up their shipments because they had a quality problem. The quality problem was that there was a cracked hub on the carpu jet. And the cracked hub didn't lead to particulate matter, but when they did an inspection, they saw some of the syringes had some something I think they called it, particulate matter, which were two separate issues. And so they held all these syringes back. It was more than just the morphine and also the hydromorphone, the labetalol, lorazepam, heparin, and they weren't going to ship it out. But because there was such a cry from providers and from patients about pain medications, they worked with the FDA to say, okay, we're going to release it because we don't think this can truly harm anybody. We think that it's going to be rare, that it's, even though we've held all the lot numbers, just as an in case, we're not going to distribute. But now, after talking to the FDA, they agreed they would distribute. So it's up to us to buy, but we're so eager to get the drug, we would buy that. The problem was, with this, they sent a 9-page document on how to properly use this to make sure you're not going to have a problem with this drug. Now, what nurse is going to read a 9-page document when she's administering that drug? So either way. So it's a very resource-intensive actions that we have to do. We've added our backup to our inventory. We changed PAR levels in our Pyxis machines. We purchased much more expensive brand generic or therapeutic alternatives. We actually have to purchase from companies that we don't have contracts with, and of course that results in a higher cost. We try to borrow from anybody, but that's very rare. Sometimes we'll purchase directly from the manufacturer, and then of course the different strengths. And again, there's just a lot of strategies that are in place that are done with every drug shortage. An article from the University of Michigan came out in 2010, and they estimated annually in the U.S. we're spending about $216 million on labor just to take care of drug shortages. And another article came out saying we're overspending on our budgets $200 million in the U.S. because of all the higher cost drugs that we certainly have to turn to. So this was a roundtable discussion. ASA was there, ASHP, FDA, the Pew Institute was there, and it was really a roundtable, but they actually published these proceedings, and I thought these were some good information, good opportunities maybe for us to discuss tomorrow or when we have our breakout session. There have been several other professional organizations. AMA just came out with their 2018 sort of stance on drug shortages, and it was to urge and encourage. But I felt this had a little more teeth into it. Particularly, I thought it was really good is that FDA should establish incentives, but maybe to pay for the incentives, establish penalties that they pay that will help compensate for the incentives. We get report cards as hospitals if we don't meet our metrics, if we don't meet our HCAP scores, if we have a high infection rate. Should a drug company have a report card so we can see, were you one of the drug companies that had the majority of shortages? Because maybe I would rather pay more money and go to a company that I think has less problems with their quality. Reconsider the purchasing process of sodium chloride. So this was a little unclear, but it's called a drug. And so I keep it in the pharmacy. So I keep a 3 or 4 day supply. So when we had this shortage, I was out really quick and struggling. Should we call it a drug? Can't we just call it a supply? Nobody's going to abuse this drug. Keep it in supply chain who has a huge warehouse who can keep multiple items. So I thought that was a really good thing to do. So in closing, I just want to mention one thing. Aaron brought up about the quotas for controlled substances. So they determine how much of a controlled substance. On August 16th, DEA came out and said, we're going to cut quotas this year. So we're struggling now. So they said there's 6 drugs that they're going to cut quotas. And guess what one of the drugs is? Fentanyl. And if they cut, and they're going to cut it by 7 to 15% from what we had this past year, from 2016, it's going to be 44% less. So then if we have a manufacturer who has a problem, FDA has already cut the quota. I don't know what we're going to do. So I think that'll be a great opportunity for us to talk about that during our breakout session. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Trish. Like I said, I'm glad I'm retired. I have other things I can deal with. So, Dave, you don't really need an introduction. You've been up here more than anyone, but Dave's going to talk to us about new anesthetics ready for rapid development. And hopefully these will not have shortages.
Well, thinking outside of the box, how can we plan ahead to increase the number of profitable drugs that can reduce our drug shortages overall? And we as a market get very few new drugs. Just an amazing, so my intent is to kind of give you some exciting things, I think, that are possible if we just have a little bit of vision. Now, I know anesthesiologists aren't necessarily visionaries. I remember having finger put in my face just before we launched propofol. I am not going to inject milk into my patient's veins. You're never going to get me to inject propofol. And that was a number of physicians who came up to me like that. Or, what are you doing giving propofol to elderly patients or patients with low cardiac ejection fractions? So I think that let's just dream a little bit and think about the possibilities. So the first drug I'm going to give you is one that is very close to my heart. It is called AZD 3043. It is a drug that's in the AstraZeneca portfolio of drugs on hold. They do not see the anesthesia market as a penetrable market because how great and no toxicity with sevoflurane or nitrous oxide, right? We need to publish some of the toxicity. We need to let the other drug manufacturers know that these drugs have some liabilities. So I've listed here, and you can't see it, but the slide set will be freely open to you to have after the meetings. These are the preclinical trials, and you can see there's 4 of those. These are the human trials that have been published. And now for quite a few years, I think the dates on this are 2015. But what is this drug? Well, this is, how many have ever administered propranolol? Anybody in the room here? It would have been Canada because it never got approved in the US. But it was, when I went up to Canada, they were still mourning the loss of propranolol. It had no pain on injection, and it was very rapid because it's like remifentanil metabolized by esterases. So, and they're all throughout the body, so when you turn it off, the patient wakes up. Here is the difference. There is the small arm of it. Am I looking at the right one? No. Right here, this is ADZ 3043, and here is propranolol. So it's got one more, it's got a propranolol side chain versus a methyl side chain. And it goes to, the bottom part is metabolized by the esterases. So, here's what they saw when they compared propranolol to methotrexate. It was, hey, kind of a good difference, but I don't know, a couple of minutes. Let's look at another slide here. This is the time to awakening. Boy, I don't see a big difference there. But this was an EEG of sleep waves. And look what happened during recovery. So we can now start talking about ultra-rapid recovery with a complete recovery profile. Your patient isn't dozing off a couple hours, maybe even 12 hours after they got their anesthetic. Wouldn't that be great? That would be fabulous. So this is a detailed look. There's 197 phase 1 and 2 patients done in healthy volunteers, men and women, 18 to 65, 72 Japanese, 125 men and women, 18 to 65, and 72 Japanese healthy volunteers, 20 to 45. That data is sitting out there. And the last slide, I will show you how much more we have to do to get this thing approved in the US, because I think it can happen. This is a little section I took out. all subjects were able to walk 10 meters without support at their 30-minute assessment period at the end of dosing, except for 2 patients who were able to do it at 45. That's a great recovery profile, right? Wouldn't that be great to have that in our portfolio? Okay, Xenon. Probably a lot of you guessed I was going to talk about Xenon, but it's expensive, it's hard to get, hello. If there's increased demand, any facility that produces oxygen and nitrogen can produce Xenon. They just have to modify their machines a little bit, and they can help meet demands that way. These are all of the clinical trials currently just completed at clinicaltrials.gov in the U.S. Here's a summary of those. But better yet, let's look at when it was approved outside of the U.S. I'll depress you even more. The year 2000, Russia approved it for anesthesia. The year 2005, it was approved in Germany. The whole EU, it's approved in 2007. We're 11 years later, and trial 1 hasn't started. Can we partner? Can we co-sponsor the first phase 3 trial to nudge this thing into a program for getting it developed? Let's see. And there are machines that are being developed that really cut the consumption and the cost of Xenon, and I've included some of the references there. Here's an article that appeared just in 2016 summarizing all of the total trials on Xenon to date. 43 total clinical trials, 1,214 Xenon. I could get this thing approved in the blink of an eye at the FDA. I mean, that's a ton of safety information that is being used. And you know, it gives you more data about how many were versus the inhalation agents, 12 versus propofol. This is a great reference to read if you have a chance. What are the clinical advantages? Rapid onset and offset. Predictable. That's much safer. You know if you turn it off, they're going to wake up because it's going to be metabolized. Less cardiovascular depression, neuroprotection and cardiac protection with profound analgesia. The Russian government has been bragging about how they're using Xenon for sports doping because it increases their endurance, it increases their stamina, but yet we can't even get trial number 1 started in the U.S. And they've been doing that since 2006. The reason they brag about it is you can't detect it. It's eliminated so quickly, there's no detection method. Okay, this is some of the data that you see with this. It's amazingly, it has the noradrenaline that's seen in the bloodstream is kept at a minimum versus sevoflurane. So the differences are huge and they're dramatic, and I think we need to take the first baby step with this one. I have one more to discuss, I think. This was just approved by the FDA, announced a fast-track designation for a phase 3 trial of inhaled Xenon gas therapy for people who are post-cardiac arrest. That's how good it is in cardiac and neuroprotection. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm nowhere near as accomplished as Dolores was in her talk on sevoflurane, but you know, if you read the sevoflurane label, they say minimal metabolism. Yeah, right. Where'd that fluorine come from? It just kind of floated off the molecule. They want me to believe that label? Well, here's something else that they've hidden, is that most of the metabolism you read in the journals and the textbooks failed to tell you that one of the intermediate molecules is 4-methyl formaldehyde, extremely reactive substance. And, you know, and is this sedating? It has been thought that this part is also sedating. So 4-methyl fluoride, it gives you the reaction for the hepatic toxicity that was discussed earlier. And guess what I did? I went out and looked at the literature, not rocket science. I found 18 deaths following sevoflurane and hepatic dysfunction. 18. There they are. You can go get the journals if you want. Why is only one of the deaths in the 2 major journals in the U.S.? I don't know. When I was at the pharmaceutical company in pharmaceutical medicine, you are told you will publish to us immediately every death. Doesn't have to be related or not. So we publish every death. And I think the reason that the journals didn't publish some of the letters that were sent to them is that maybe it wasn't related because they got a couple of other drugs or something. No, if we're going to actually put the profile that's appropriate for sevoflurane, somebody needs to know that there have already been 18 deaths, and who knows how big the iceberg is that's beneath the surface. So, what's the remedy for that? The remedy is easy. If you deuterate sevoflurane, metabolism goes to nothing. So deuterated sevoflurane, Max Baker has done it. He's added deuterated ions to sevoflurane, and right away the metabolism drops way down. I think Max and Dolores could start talking about some studies to look at the hepatic and validate this. So I put together this slide, and I don't know if you can see it in the back, but across the top I put preclinical IND, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, approved, and phase 4, and who has the commercial rights. Well, in a number of instances I wasn't sure, so I didn't put it down. The only one I know for sure is AstraZeneca, and so it is ready for phase 3. Phase 3 is not a lengthy process. Hello, especially when you got thousands of patients already in the literature demonstrating and confirming the safety, and it's already approved in, I think it's between 12 and 14 other countries. So, Xenon, look at this. You've got a lot of the phase 3. This one's ready for phase 3. So phase 3 is the only phase you have to complete prior to regulatory approval. Deuterated sevoflurane, the 2 compounds won't even differ by a full hydrogen ion. It's a little bit more nuclear weight in the nucleus, so they're not major differences. I've also added a couple more here for our partners that deal with lipids. Propofol and MCT. That could conceivably be the drug of choice in propofol infusion syndrome, because MCTs, for those who know it, can substitute for glucose and feed the brain when glucose is not being used as a fuel source. Also, if you know anything about the icosanoid pharmacology, which I've given lectures on, the fatty acid formulation of soybean oil only feeds one side, the pro-inflammatory side. The omega-3s would be the anti-inflammatory side. So you would have a formulation of propofol that both provides the precursors for the icosanoids, supporting both a balanced inflammatory machine. And I think that's it.
Okay, Dave, stay after because So, Aaron and Trish, and I'd like to also welcome up here to the panel Callie Long and Melanie Power Burns. Kelly is with Pharmedia, and as Mark said at the outset, Pharmedia and also Fresenius Kabi are two major sponsors of this program. And I suspect there won't be any questions to these two ladies about drug shortages. Oh, okay. Well, it says here you're at, for today, you're with Pharmedia, right? Come on up and jump up here. And so we'll go ahead and start with questions. Jeff?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the nice talk. So something's happened at the bedside in practice that's leading to a fair amount of waste of drugs, and it drives a lot of us crazy, particularly in light of the shortages. So in particular, there's two things. So one is we're required now to use a different vial for every patient. And I don't know how ubiquitous that practice is, but in a pediatric practice in particular, we end up throwing out a lot of drug in each vial. So I wonder if there's any comments on that and any regulatory possibilities. The second is when we prepare syringes for infusion at the bedside, propofol in particular, there seems to be a lot of waste. I know the ASA had published a guideline on how much propofol to draw up based on patient size and how long you're going to run the infusion. But I wonder if you've had any experience in your institutions around some encouraging people to draw up smaller amounts and that sort of thing to reduce waste.
So the one vial, one patient, that's from the CDC. And it's very difficult for hospitals, especially in shortages. We are held to that rule by Joint Commission, by DNV, by our accreditors. And certainly there's room for advocacy there for change, but it's very, very frustrating. And then propofol, I know it's nice when there are smaller vials available. So, the holy grail for all of us, I think, is getting the right size of drug and the right presentation, and so many of our medications are not commercially available like that. So,
Sure. We'll get to Mike to you. This is Deb Pasco from the ASHP.
Thanks, Aaron. Just to elaborate a little further, so propofol is only good in syringes for 6 hours. So there is a limiting factor there that we would have to look into. And also the single value. So I'm a pediatric pharmacist by training. I hate to throw things away too, but that does come from the CDC. And also if those things have been drawn up in a clean room or not. So there's also, different restrictions around 797 and what we do in our clean rooms versus a non-sterile environment. Thanks.
Thanks, Deb.
Steve Barker, Massimo Corp. And University of Arizona right down the road from here. Somebody's got to volunteer to play the role of the old curmudgeon, so here I am. We've talked about, thanks. We've talked about drugs that are in shortage. Let's talk about drugs that disappeared for no good reason. FDA-approved safe drugs, and of course I think I'm talking about thiopental, which in many cases, in many patients, I will argue with anybody, is superior to propofol for a lot of reasons. Happy to debate that. What the hell happened? The excuses I've heard and read are absurd, like Hospira stopped making it because some states or countries were using it for lethal injection. Okay. It's a great drug. It's cheap. It's cheaper than propofol. It's got fewer adverse reactions. So where is it? Bring it back.
bottom line is that no drug company has to make anything. It's all a business, and there's absolutely no requirement, and that's exactly how we get into shortages and getting good drugs off the market. You're exactly right.
Right. And you know, I'm totally a free market capitalist, so I know that and I accept it, but damn, can't we? Okay, maybe this is an exception. Let's come up with some incentive to make them want to produce thiopental. Thanks.
I can actually, I don't know about thiopental, but I know about methohexatol. What happened with methohexatol, and I think you can probably guess it happened with thiopental, is they're making this thing and they're making maybe 10 cents on a vial. And then the FDA comes and says, you've got to upgrade your facility. And all cash in. It's not possible to keep generics on the market if FDA keeps their, why are they doing that? Why are they in a period of drug shortage? And it could be just a technical thing. So I'm with you. It's very discouraging.
Jim Suchik, Michigan Medicine. I've been reading some stuff by Nassim Taleb on skin in the game and what makes things fragile. Our drug supply system is very fragile, and the systems theory people put it due to centralization and lack of accountability are two things. So what are the roles of group purchasing organizations in the centralization of our purchasing for drugs? Because I can't find an answer when I ask the person that attends my technical support meeting, well, what's our contract with? And it's like, it's complicated. What are the role of rebates in distorting the price market? Because, we can't get that from that supplier because if we decrease our purchasing of this, we no longer get all our IV fluids there and we'll get shortchanged over there. And lastly, so that's the question to answer, when we have to argue as a market-based person, we always get someone who blames the manufacturers, whether it's Massimo for making a better pulse ox or someone else. And it becomes a Morton's fork kind of argument. If you charge too much during a period of shortage, they say, you're price gouging. If you charged too little, unfair competition, you're undercutting the competition, we're going to get you for that. And if you charge just the same, they say, you must be in collusion. You must have had a meeting where you met with your competitors and you all decided on the same price. So you're in a spot where you can't win unless you realize and go and tell the senator and the Congress critter and stuff that's like, no, let me go through the logic here and tell you that when there's a shortage, the price has to come up. And our insurance markets has distorted how we price things, so we don't really buy our drugs anymore. We buy a future on the drugs that haven't been delivered. And then something happens like Puerto Rico. But if any of the panel has any input on what the group purchasing organizations, how that purchasing actually works, please enlighten us.
So
Put it in a
that
paper
second
somewhere.
part was not a question, right?
Correct.
I'll take a stab at it. So, great commentary. I think we could do a 2-day conference just on drug pricing. To be very simplistic, a group purchasing organization is like having a membership at Costco. You pay a fee to be part of the group purchasing organization. Yes, no, I deal with our contract every day. They give us a book of contracts that we have access to. So I don't have to go out and make a contract with Fresenius, Pfizer, Merck. I have access to those contracts already. So we can choose to buy that contracted product or not. Like Costco, you do get money back at the end of the year if you are compliant to your Vizient contract or Premier or whoever you were part of.
There's one change, though, that you didn't say, which is that the group purchasing organization can also collect monies from the manufacturer of the drug or the equipment.
Oh, sure. Just like Costco gets money from their suppliers to be in their store. Absolutely.
So they have skin in the game to raise the price.
Well, the other part of that, though, is if our hospital finds a lower price, we're not going to buy it on our GPO contract. We're going to buy it off contract. And then that's what we do every day. I'm in charge of our purchasing for our entire health system. It's over $100 million budget, and that's how we do it. I can't say that how every other hospital does it.
Can you comment on a new paradigm perhaps?
Let's get a microphone for you.
You want to go back to the mic?
We might go back to the mic. Fine. Done.
Trish, you want to comment on this?
Okay.
too?
Okay.
We'll come back.
And then I gotta catch a plane in 5 minutes, so I'm so sorry. Email me these questions. I'm happy to have that
It's on the,
continued discussion. 'cause
it's on the
important.
Project RX. That is changing the paradigm on how we deal with pharmacy. Can you comment on that, the founding, the tier, and all, and the partnership members? Just a little bit, just generally.
So, Intermountain, not University of Utah, but Intermountain has proposed making a not-for-profit drug company. We are, it's very much still in the works. We're waiting, like everyone else, to hear more details about that. But the intent is that they will make a not-for-profit drug company and use contract manufacturers to make the drugs. They're not going to make a factory. They're going to use the same contract manufacturers that everyone else is using right now. So it's not really increasing capacity. Yes, they do intend to buy the ANDAs for those generic products. Yes. And with that, I am so sorry. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to comment on that?
I'll just wait till the next.
Okay. All right. Next.
Okay, I'm Piyush Mathur. I'm the quality officer at Cleveland Clinic for Anesthesia. And just joining the long line of free market capitalists over here about this comment on the medications, especially for us, and why they are so short. I suspect it's a lot to do with the margins, right? As compared to cardiology or hem-onc or other groups, it's small margins for the companies, and when they have like some market factors, they'll say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this anymore. But then this concept of bringing in new drugs, introducing new drugs, I'm not sure if that is one solution, but I'm not sure if that's a long-term solution to this problem. Because in 5 to 10 years, again, those newly introduced drugs will again go the same way. So is there something that we need to do on the regulation side that needs to help this? But again, you don't want to curb the free market capitalism either, which we all benefit from. So comments on that.
So, yeah, they can choose to do what they want. Even antivenoms, we had a patient just this last week. They no longer make coral snake antivenom. I had to get it from Costa Rica. I had to get permission from FDA to get it from Costa Rica because it's not available, because very few people get bit by coral snakes, and therefore there was no money in it. But that was up to the drug company, and FDA has no authority to do anything different. So I think, as Aaron said, it's the free market. So as new drugs come on, we hope that they're better. We hope that they have an indication that we can actually maybe eliminate. That's what we do with the P&T process. If you bring on a new drug and it is a better drug, less side effects than the old drug, we'll eliminate the old drug from our formulary to keep our costs down and keep our inventory lower.
Next question.
Here comes another free market proponent. We do not have a free market, at least for anesthesia medications in this country. The market is corrupted, and it is corrupted by federal legislation or regulation. Worst among them is the exemption from the kickback status for GPOs. So what the speaker a little while ago said, that there is money flowing from the hospitals to the GPO and from the manufacturers to the GPOs, distorts the market. The GPOs have managed to limit the number of manufacturers to sometimes only one. And so if a natural or man-made disaster happens, we have a drug shortage. We should, in this country, have a robust market with redundant manufacturers and sources, and we don't. So the first thing we need to ask for is for federal revision of all these market-limiting factors. And I can tell you, just a few weeks ago, I had a conversation with Admiral Giroir, who is Assistant Secretary of HHS. He heads up a drug shortage task force and is an advisor to such a task force at the White House. They're fully aware of that. And I'm hoping that this administration will do away with these market-impeding regulations and laws.
So, yeah, pharma has lobbyists. It's one of the stronger lobbyist groups, probably on Capitol Hill.
So Baron Metz, Penn State University. The question I have for the panel is why does the government not get into the manufacturing of generic drugs?
Well, it's an extremely complicated process for propofol.
We put somebody on the moon, we can manufacture our own drugs.
Yeah. It's
India does it. India has a generic drug manufacturing process. Why can't the American government do it as a way of ensuring health care?
I don't mind that, but it's an extremely complicated and involved process where the vials go like this during the sterilization process. They're tumbling, they're going around in a circle. It's not easy to purchase that equipment for the government. And but I do think that all of the people who are coming to the microphone have good points, that this is a crazy system. We are dealing with patients' lives, their well-being, and we're rolling the dice as far as what drug's going to be in the operatory when we get there. And I just don't think that's satisfactory. I think the APSF should look towards trying to develop some FDA and other relationships that can help support. Do we have anybody on these boards that are dealing with drug shortages? Because we could be funneling in information this way.
Let me just jump in here because we're in the way of lunch, I think, but
Yeah.
We have one more question. But I do think that all these points are really important for tomorrow in the discussions and the breakouts, so please keep this in mind. We'll take our last question.
Steve Kramer. We talked a lot about government regulation and all that kind of stuff, but I'm curious, at a hospital level, at a provider level, what do you think as the panel, and thank you for all your talks, are the most effective interventions on a hospital level and provider level that we can implement to try to prevent these things from happening? I know a lot of it, from personal experience, is communication with our disciplines. We don't have enough notification at a provider level saying, boy, I just ran out of one of the most important drugs in my intensive care unit. Oh, and by the way, you're using the last dose. So what can we figure out, and what in your experience, most effective interventions on a hospital level that we could all come back to our hospitals and say, hey, these are things that have been used?
So we're doing a lot. I don't know that it's sustainable. I don't know how much more we can do because we don't get good information. I think we're going in the right direction with some of these committees declaring a drug shortage as a national security issue. It's not just an inconvenience. It is a patient safety, national security issue. People are dying. And we're not getting traction. This has gone on for many, many years. And the pharma companies, 64% of the reasons that they're shut down is quality. That's something you can fix. You can't fix the hurricane. We'd have to accept that. But maybe if you're going to supply drugs, you have to take some ownership and responsibility. And we have to perhaps say, if I sign a contract with you and you're going to give me your drugs, I'm going to purchase your drugs, and you suddenly can't give me your drugs, should you bear the burden of the extra cost? Should you bear the burden of all the employees that I'm keeping over that I've pulled off patient care to take care of drug shortages? I mean, somehow the pain point isn't enough, and I think it comes down to finances, and I am so ready to pay more money for a product that I know that the company has proactive, good, thorough quality, because this drug shortage is consuming our time and our efforts down.
Thanks, Trish. I'm going to call the the end of this, but that will be one of our breakout sessions tomorrow, so I'm sure we'll get some great ideas. So thank you very much to the panel. And thanks again to our sponsors for this program as well. Sorry you guys didn't get a chance to have any input.
Okay, so just a couple things. Anybody that thinks at 11:30 tomorrow they'd like to get a shuttle, we'll provide a shuttle to the airport. Raise your hand so I get a sense of how many. Okay, if you folks will sometime between now and the end of the day visit with Stacy Maxwell out there and sign up, we're going to get some shuttles to come and take everybody en masse to the airport, so it'd save 47 Ubers coming all at one time. So please do that. Number two, there's no registration to this meeting. I don't know if the food's any good, but hopefully it will be because it usually is. If you happen to ever think APSF's a good organization you'd like to donate, there's actually a thing called a dip jar out there. I don't know, some little machine on Stacy's table. Put your credit card in and pull it out. You're $100 lighter, but you're feeling good about yourself. So go have a good lunch. We'll see you back here at 1 o'clock.